We are live. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Armato here with What Really Matters with attorney Chris Fry. We are going to discuss some
Things.
today. How's your day going, Chris?
It's going well. Had a good salad.
Salad?
Salit. S-A-L-I-T.
Good weekend?
Yes. Yeah, it's been a little rainy lately, but
I don't know,
it's
man.
Florida.
I would have expected a little bit more rain, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, it's been raining at weird times. You know, it used to kind of be consistently right around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you get hit for about 20, 25 minutes, and then that was it.
Yeah, well, with the hurricane or ish, hurricane-ish,
that's right.
could we have said ish on the hurricane?
Ish. I think Ish is a tropical storm.
Well, initially it was a hurricane, so I think we,
Yeah.
not that I'm tempting fate or wanted to call in anything else to us this past weekend. I'm happy how it turned out. Moved a lot of furniture for nothing.
Yeah, but we didn't get crushed.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like I said, that wasn't a complaint. I see a bunch of people today going, "Oh, is that all you got? Hurricane Isaias?"
Yeah, right.
And I
Those
was
are the
like,
people from other states that don't have to deal with hurricanes.
Yeah,
What
you know.
what we're on I now because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
they
yeah,
do
mhm. Yep.
they name them by
Uh,
letter alphabetically.
Yep.
And do they still alternate male and female names?
I don't know that.
I remember they used to. you
Yeah.
know, so
I got nothing. We
nothing
used to
on
have
that.
a bunch of friends. Used to do a hurricane party every year.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning of the season, and we would burn the names. Right at it would be the burning of the names was like the big event, and yeah, we haven't done that in years. But it
Yeah.
used to get crazy. It'd be like a couple hundred people.
At one point, I think I did a little research on that because I always was curious as to how they name them. Like, is there a committee or is there like a single person who's appointed as the official hurricane namer?
And what did you come up with?
Nothing.
All right. So we're no better off. Glad you brought that up.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
A well of useless knowledge.
Sure. Or actually, you didn't have any knowledge,
no,
so just an
zero
empty well
knowledge.
today.
Just an empty well.
There you go. Let's talk about the app a little bit, shall we?
Yes, we shall. We have been focusing primarily of late on the enterprise version. And the enterprise version is becoming very, very popular with law firms. The
Camera's not on. Not on.
The cameras?
Wait.
I just saw. Are you messing with me?
Are we live still?
I got it. Okay. Is it? Any suggestions for me? I got it.
Turn the cameras on.
Turn
No, look right here. Look, it's right here. Is it?
Okay.
Well, I can see it here.
Yeah, well, for some reason, I can't see it.
We are broadcasting from the dark.
Somebody turn the lights on.
Welcome to the Consult mobile app cave.
Let's see. We're going to get the camera fixed.
We're having some technical difficulties. Bear with us.
Are we actually broadcasting? Like,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
the world hear us?
They can hear us. They just can't see us. Actually, it might be a good thing. They might like
That
us
could
better.
be a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to swing over here and give me a any suggestions what I hit over here?
Sure, I can swing over. As long as the camera's
I mean, you don't have to swing, even though we do have vines hanging from the ceilings.
What am I? What did I not do?
It says connected. Oh, you're not. You don't have anybody in there. You gotta bring this over here. This is the output.
What do I hit?
You gotta hit the keyboard, or just hit this. How do you set up for a show and don't even have a keyboard?
Well, don't I normally just
We are experiencing technical difficulties.
All right. There we go. We're here. Thank you, Dave.
That's amazing.
Had a little excitement. Never hurt anybody. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah.
It's amazing.
We probably had
So much better.
we would have had more viewers in the dark.
Yeah,
Hey, who turned the lights on? Who turned the lights on?
It's amazing what pushing the right.
Way better. A little less shine off the forehead.
Shit, we're having lots of visitors now.
Yeah, right?
We've got tons of
No, everybody just got off. Oh, no, forget it.
It's amazing what pressing the right button can do.
Well, listen, have fun.
Yeah, appreciate it. I thought you were Joe coming in. All right, well, that was interesting. All right, back to the Enterprise.
Yes, Enterprise. And for those of you who don't know, the Consult Enterprise, is it a division or is it an option?
Sure.
There we go.
It's a division with an option.
It's an optional division. And we Consult Enterprise is our business sector that deals with producing an individualized app and cross-platform
Customizing an app.
web access that run in real time. We tested it the other day. Pretty amazing. As soon as I click the mouse, boom. Whatever action or that we do on the app is immediately affected on the
I'm
website.
amazed at the speed.
The speed's incredible.
I mean,
Literally, we were timing it, and when I would click the mouse, you would get the action on your
it's
app.
instantaneous.
Yes.
It's instantaneous. And I'm shocked. You know, we were talking about it like, you know, that signal goes to a satellite.
That's
comes
that's
back
amazing.
down,
I mean,
right?
it's in
And it's like-
orbit, and it hits the satellite, comes back down to your phone wherever you are, instantaneously. Like literally,
I was shocked.
A nanosecond.
Like no delay whatsoever. And you know, we're having a lot of interest here with the Enterprise version.
yes,
You know, I think that everybody wants their own little toy, and with what we're providing, the time that we're providing it, and the price point that we're providing it at, it's like, how do you say no?
correct.
And there's a need. You know, we read articles all the time about where we're at in society. You know, this pandemic, but just the law industry in itself. You know, we're addressing an immediate need.
Well, the legal industry, well, we'll call it the industry because it encompasses everybody who's involved in it. That would be clients, attorneys, paralegals, staff,
Criminals,
criminals,
alleged criminals.
civil plaintiffs, defendants, and that's another marketplace that we're investigating is insurance defense firms, because for all of the plaintiffs' attorneys out there are firms that represent insurance companies who could use the same application. And it's just amazing because it's something that, well, you know, as well as I do, the primary question we hear from everybody, which is,
It's not out there yet.
Yeah, hasn't anybody thought about this before? And people may have thought about it, but nobody's acting on it. And
Well, I think people have thought about having an app. Attorneys have thought about having apps.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly, right?
they've tried to
What-
develop them in-house.
Yeah,
in
because
their
we've
firms.
spoke to some people that have, right? And I think the big thing is the functionality. I think the way that we've organized it, designed it, the way it's being implemented, they see it and they're like, it's like that aha moment for them.
Yeah, and they're seeing the operating version of it. They
Sure.
don't see the massive amount of hours, research, development that goes into
The
it,
storyboards.
tweaking it and adding functions. I mean, when we first started with the concept, it was basically a video communication tool that has now expanded into a complete communication suite
Yep.
featuring the video consultation, which is crystal clear video, it's crystal clear audio, and as we said before, it's immediate. There's no delay, there's no lag time. The audio is crystal clear, and now with the complete case management suite, which includes all features through our research that not only attorneys but clients that we've interviewed over the months that they want. You know,
Right.
while clients want certain features, attorneys need certain
Sure.
features, and they happen to coincide, which is a beautiful thing because as it's developed, the features that the attorneys need happen to be the features that the clients and users want, and we include users because it also includes other attorneys that are within the same firm and their staff, because oftentimes attorneys are in court. So
Well, support
you know,
staff.
Sure. And legal assistants and paralegals and other attorneys in the firm can all interact,
Secretaries.
interface on the app
Right.
or on the website. Those people who are working in the offices don't even need to leave their desk. They just, click to the consult icon, up pops the screen, and they get exactly what's going on the attorney's cell phones.
And we've discussed this in the past. You know, I've had conversations, and I'm like, from your past experiences, and you ran around, 3 or 4 counties, right, on a regular basis,
yeah,
right?
6 to 8.
And within a week of your, typical schedule, having this app would have saved you
hours.
a week.
Week, yes, definitely. Throughout the course of a month, and I think that was one of the things we were doing, was we're trying to time everything that goes into a simple communication.
Yep.
Traditionally, it was in-office meetings for certain, obviously, more important things, signing documents, reviewing discovery, and discovery includes basically all information involved in a case. Document sharing is a paramount concern, and there are other video applications or software out there, but nothing is specifically intended for the legal community before consult, and that's where we draw the questions from people about, well, isn't there anyone out there that's doing it?
Right.
And you don't want to be facetious, but you almost want to say, well, did you ever think of using one? And
Well, then we talk about the time savings factor, right?
Oh, my gosh.
You yourself, we're talking about literally hours a week, right?
Right.
Now imagine we're talking about enterprise, right? You have 50 or 100 attorneys, and you're shaving off,
hundreds of hours.
a month.
Yeah, in wasted time.
Right.
I
Well,
won't say
not
wasted
non-productive.
time. Non-productive
Non-productive
time.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because involved in that, because many attorneys, particularly litigators, as opposed to transactional attorneys, you're in court, you have to get back for that appointment, which means drive time. If you hit an accident, if you hit
Yep.
a series of red lights,
Construction.
construction, bus circles when you're dropping off
Yep.
kids for school, anything you can imagine that causes a delay on the road, getting back to your office, and then once you're in the office, generally you need at least a few minutes to kind of get yourself oriented
Sure.
and settled in, get your computer turned up, and then go in to meet with a client. And you're trying to pull whatever little information you can off of whether it's your firm's website or your firm's internal
Yep.
management system, which is another thing. Surprisingly, in talking to the attorneys that we've spoken to, which are thousands, many of them have no case management software.
Shocking
at
that some of them
all.
still don't, right?
Correct.
I mean, we've talked to attorneys as recent as last week who are basically still operating on a paper system.
yes, and they'll use a paper file and somewhat transfer notes if they transfer notes, and when it comes to issues pertaining to not only bar complaints, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but when a case ends, it's not necessarily over. Like, let's say I do or had done criminal for 30 plus years. When you kind of put it in the closed file cases, it's warehoused, it goes in, and anything that's not in whatever computer case management software they may have, most of which is antiquated by now. I mean, look at the computer industry. What has it been? It went from pagers to, interactive cell phones with everything you can imagine on them in 15 to 20 years.
Yep.
I mean, in the large scale picture of the progression of technology, that's like light speed.
Well, think about this: the cloud, right?
Oh, the cloud, yes.
Look at what and how that's changed. Particularly the law industry. People literally used to have storage units full, or garages, or however they stored their warehouses
yeah.
full of files, right? That they had to keep on record. Is it 6 years, 7 years?
7 years. And,
Yeah.
and you're not only paying for the warehouse space, but once the files are in the warehouse, you don't have access to them. Maybe an index card or something with general basic information about the case. But when a client calls up, let's say a typical criminal case, you're representing them, you're reviewing discovery, you do whatever you need to do, and then you get a call from a prosecutor, and they say, hey, listen, I'm going through my calendar for Monday, a pretrial calendar. If your client wants to resolve this early, once again, to try and save time or get cases resolved because they want to keep the cases moving, the Florida Supreme Court, at least in the state of Florida, and I think it's very similar throughout the country, the judges are, through their state Supreme Courts, are given directives by the justices as to the timetables that they want cases completed by. Usually it's based, at least, I won't say loosely, but it's based on, constitutional rights to speedy trial. So, if you have 90 days for a misdemeanor, 175 days for a felony, the time goals are to get those cases done in that period of time. So usually the time goals float right around somewhere close to those initial cutoff dates, and obviously,
Unless it's like a high-profile case.
sure, and then there are certain cases that are simply far more complex. Most attorneys are juggling anywhere from 80 to 120 cases at a time.
Jeez.
In various stages with various, objectives, client objectives in mind. So when you're doing that, you're constantly having to note on your file what the time goal is, each date, and trying to get something resolved by that time. But then you have things that are literally out of your control. There may be a critical piece of evidence that the state attorney's office can't provide to you because they haven't received it from the police department. The police department is, still waiting to get a police report from their officers or deputies or whomever's in charge of the investigation, and those guys are constantly on a run, and so there are inherent delays in trying to get that stuff. Now, I mean, sometimes as a defense attorney, you may try and use that to your advantage to negotiate the case because they don't have certain evidence on time. One huge thing is labs. When you have whether it's a drug case or you're waiting for fingerprints or you're waiting for DNA evidence, and it's sitting in an FDLE lab or an FBI lab somewhere waiting for the results, and they're tied up because they're getting cases from all over the state
Sure.
into one office, and their toxicologists or whomever their experts are in their office are waiting to get around to get things, to get results. So things most often don't hit those constitutional deadlines. So
Timing is of the essence.
oh, absolutely. And so when it's progressing that way, you hate to say it, but just I think practically speaking, it's honest. Out of sight, out of mind. You go to court, you handle your whatever it is, whether it's 1 or 16 cases on a pretrial calendar. You're making your notes. You give your, you log them into your computer, and then you hand the file off, it goes back into the vault, or whatever different firms call it, their active case files as opposed to closed case files. And unfortunately, you try and review each file, figure out what needs to be done, set depositions. Depositions may get postponed or delayed because either a court reporter can't make it, or one or other attorneys is in court or on vacation, or whatever the case may be. So they delay. And while that's happening,
The clock's ticking.
the clock's ticking, and you're on to the next case or 20, and tend to, I won't say oftentimes, but the risk is that you lose track of what's going on with that case because it's not actively on your desk while it's being worked on. So
Yeah. So technology's really expedited things. Like,
oh, absolutely. And what Consult does, there's so many things that it does. All of those notes and everything that you log into the case are put into your history file, your task list, things that
Right.
you're requesting an attorney, or I'm sorry, a client to do. For example, when you're an attorney, clients tend to think, hey, once I hire the attorney, it's okay. Now it's your ball game, and just let me know what to do. Let me know when my next court date is. And it's like, well, there's a lot of things that need to be done before then. And when we talk about our task list, that is critical to proper representation. So if the client or a witness or anyone else involved in a case has access to or needs to find or locate things for you, you're either A, going to pay private investigators to go out and find this stuff, and they usually start by saying, let me go visit your client and find out, who it is I'm looking for, or what evidence is pertinent or missing or wasn't in the police report. And, I'm not, criticizing police officers at all, but police officers, at least in the majority of cases, we'll say non-federal cases, because they deal with the FBI. FBI traditionally deals with what we call historical crime, where they're usually keeping a history of the ongoing crime, and everything's documented and filed. But surprisingly, in many occasions, it's not filed sequentially. I mean, I've had cases with Department of Law Enforcement, who was like the state FBI in Florida. That's what they kind of refer to themselves at. But they're the primary investigative agency, and sometimes they'll have like months and months and months of investigation going on, and they compile the evidence, but it's not, there's no chronological order or sequence to it. You just receive this bulk of...
and it's up for you to disseminate what's what.
Right, and you have to sort it out and figure out what's going on with it. When you have a tool like Consult, as you go through each document, you can scan and upload it to Scanner. The in-app scanner is awesome. I mean, you just basically zoom in, click, loads up to your...
Yeah. You hit
Here
upload
now.
document, and it's uploaded. Yeah.
And then it's on your website, your Consult site, and it's all encapsulated into an app. So that does two things. Number one, it basically sorts and stores all of your documentation into the appropriate case file. And this has happened, and it happens on a routine basis, where one documentation or one document, for example, from case A may get filed into case B because you're getting a massive discovery at the same time. And unfortunately, sometimes you get entire case files from cases that have nothing to do with you, and they're sent over by the state attorney's office or from another attorney that you're taking a case over from, and you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
And
You've even made mention of, one of the things that Consult does prevent is sending a wrong file to a
Yes.
wrong client, right?
And that can be critical, because when you're dealing with probably 90 to 95% of everything that's transacted over, whether it's a telephone call or, in our case, a video or a document sharing, you cannot be sending one client's discovery mixed in or blended with another client's discovery. It's an ethical violation.
Yeah.
You are unintentionally granted. It's an unintentional disclosure,
but a disclosure
but
nonetheless.
the bar doesn't look at it
Right.
that way. The bar looks at it as like your obligation is to prevent
Yeah.
unintended persons from receiving confidential information. Or
How common is that, do you think?
I think it's more common than people let on. It's
Well-
happened to me.
Well,
I won't
you're
be
an
shy
attorney,
about
though,
it.
but, you would probably, like a paralegal or a secretary, they would be probably the ones that would know more, right?
Correct.
Like
But under the ethical obligations, the attorney in charge of the case is,
on the hook.
implicitly
Yeah.
responsible
Sure.
for everything their staff does. And then the senior partners in the firm or the managing partners are responsible for everything that goes on from all of their, underlings, if you will, or junior partners, associates, law clerks. And if one of those people shoot out the wrong information to the wrong person, the senior partners are now accountable for that. So you want to talk about a mass panic when someone realizes, holy crap, we sent the wrong discovery to the wrong person, and that's confidential information. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a mass panic to try and get the document back. You're begging people, please don't discuss this with anybody. It was an inadvertent,
Yeah.
could you please return the documentation, which oftentimes doesn't happen. Now, you're trusting that they're going to toss it in the trash or burn it or whatever, but you have no idea. And if it happens to be a case where the people know each other, God only knows what they're doing with it. They're probably sending it to their friends or the people they know, saying, hey, you know what I got in the mail from your lawyer? And now it's not only embarrassing, and from the client or the public standpoint, it makes the attorney or the firm look like they're incompetent.
Yeah.
And it's just an incredibly bad situation.
And Consult helps with that.
And it does, because everything is digitally segregated so that won't happen.
Yeah, because you have your own set of clients. Every client, is in their own little room.
Right. And so, therefore, it's
Isn't it great, though, from an
extremely-
organizational perspective, that you, from the very beginning, you're starting off being organized?
Immediately, right. And
From the
it's-
time that you invite them, they have their own spot on the suite.
Right. If you, just to use an analogy, which are usually effective in conveying what you're trying to say, just imagine a row of lockers, and each locker is a
Yeah.
different case.
Yeah.
When you get the documentation and you go to send it, it goes to locker 1 and not locker 4. And so with Consult, everything again.
Well, you're already
is-
in that locker.
Right. And
You know.
you're in the locker, and everything that goes on in that locker is on your secure.
Yeah, because you can't even access
platform.
it, from outside of that. You have to actually be in on that client to access
Exactly.
anything for that client.
And that's what we were doing the other day when we were testing
Yeah.
the document uploads and,
Yep.
and things like that. And I don't mean like testing it for the first time. As we go through these things, and we're doing video scripts for the tutorials
Yep.
we're working on, which are turning out fantastic. We're getting rave reviews on those from people who are seeing them, because it basically, we're working in conjunction with the tech guys, the tech guys, and the tech guys are taking the audio tracks that we record after we draft the scripts, and they're doing
Shooting
the
a video,
voiceovers
yeah.
over the voiceover. Yeah, the voiceover goes over the video. The video is then adapted to that, and so each video tutorial, depends, and it's only like what, maybe a minute and a half to 3 minutes long, depending on the subject,
Yeah, it's tough.
or how many things are involved in
To
that
say that
process.
we've gone through the app with a fine-tooth comb is a gross understatement.
Yeah, I mean, we're going through it meticulously, and so, but in the end, the final product is a video that is spot on accurate to what you need to do for
Right.
each function.
Right.
We even have caveats in or cautions in certain video script where we explain, hey, this is well for,
Just to ensure
Sure.
that you're using it properly. We want to make sure, right, that the client being the attorney and then the user, right, being the client of the attorney is taken care of, right?
Exactly.
We want to go, hey, this is what we're providing for you. We want to make sure you use our product to the best of its ability, and we're turning over every stone to make sure that we have it like verbatim of what you need to do, like every action.
Exactly. So behind the scenes, we're doing all of that, the segregation portions of it. But when the video comes out with the tutorial, what the client and the users and the attorneys are getting is simply the correct,
Yeah.
description of a brief video that shows you exactly how to use each function, like you said, so they can get the maximum benefit from all of the features on
Yep.
the app. The features keep expanding,
Yep.
but once we go through the video tutorials or you go through the tutorials, it's so simple to learn how to use it. It's kind of like anything. When you look at the big picture, it can be overwhelming. Like,
Sure.
how am I going to learn how to use all this stuff? But when you go through each thing step by step, it's like, oh, that was a piece of cake.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you want to maximize everybody's time.
Yes.
And getting frustrated if there was something that you didn't understand, but now you just watch a video or you read the script, right? And you'll have an acute understanding in real time, right, of how that works and how it's supposed to work, right, and what you can expect.
Exactly.
That being said, let's segue and we're going to talk a little bit about some current laws, little lawyer talk.
Yes.
Chris and I, we often speak about, hey, this would be an interesting topic or this would be an interesting topic. So today we're going to talk a little bit about concealed carry
Concealed carry.
and if you're going to travel, what you should think about. Chris, you're the gun expert. Although every time you handle a gun, I get nervous.
Luckily, they're airsoft guns.
Yeah, most of the time. So tell us a little bit about what we were discussing earlier, a little bit about the concealed carry and how it's applicable and if you travel and what you can expect.
Okay. First of all, obviously, we live in a nation that is made up of states and some commonwealths, but most people generically call them states. But each state has their own, how would you say, parameters regarding concealed carry. And when we talk about concealed carry, most people think firearms or guns. But the concealed carry permits, when you're granted a permit, not only include the ability to carry a concealed firearm, but they also deal with concealed weapons, which can be, there's a vast array of what's contemplated as a weapon. And
If you have any questions, just come see Chris's office. And you'll have a
The
vast
Tower
array
of London.
of weaponry.
And and each state has, again, different parameters. I guess varying degrees. I wouldn't call it leniency. I would call it more like they have different definitions of what concealed carry is. For example, in many states, Florida included, you can possess, a firearm in, say, the passenger compartment of a vehicle, which is basically where everyone sits, and what is considered concealed. Usually it's in a snapped holster, which gets into varying degrees of, what's considered a snapped holster. You have nowadays what they call these Serpa holsters, where when it has no snap on the top, but when you slide the firearm into the holster, it's got a locking device or mechanism inside, which clicks shut inside the trigger guard, so you can't pull the gun and it won't fall out of the holster. Some states consider that to be an open top holster and not under the legal definition of a securely encased firearm because there is no overhand snap. Other holsters will include an optional snap that you can stick on and snap it, and technically now that's not a concealed weapon, whereas if it's unsnapped, it is a concealed weapon. Various places in the vehicle where you can have it. In Florida, I'll start with Florida. Let's say we're traveling north and we've got a meeting in New York or New Jersey or what have you. We'll use New York, New Jersey. Well, as you're driving and you cross into another state, everybody's like, "Oh, hey, welcome to Georgia," and you see a sign with a peach on it or something. Well, when you cross that line, the concealed carry laws may change. And in some states,
They do change.
They do change. And so you may get a number of consecutive states that are very similar, and they'll reciprocate with one state's concealed weapon permit, and you're in the clear. But there are other states that have limited reciprocation, or they don't reciprocate at all. And New York, New Jersey, I believe Illinois,
California, Oregon, Washington,
yeah, they have much more strict.
no reciprocity.
And they don't
Hawaii.
reciprocate. So if you're driving along and you're not really thinking about, hey, I got a firearm in the car, because when I started off in Florida, it was either in a snapped holster or in a closed glove box or in a console that was with a lid on it that was shut. And under the law or the definitions of that state, that is concealed. It's concealed, but it's properly concealed, and there's no problem. You cross that state line, if you get pulled over for speeding or what have you, and officer says, "Have any firearms in the case or weapons or things I should know about?"
And you're like, "Oh,
It's like, "Oh, sure, yeah, it's in my console," and then you're in handcuffs because you're carrying a concealed firearm,
Right.
because under that state's definition, that's not protected.
right."
So it's a very important issue, particularly for people who drive, truck drivers in particular, anybody who's conveying goods from one state to another. I remember, fortunately, in one of my vehicles, we had, in the back seat, one of those flip down armrests, and then if you pull down, the backing of the armrest where it folds up into, it gives complete access to the trunk. So when I would drive, I would take, my pistol or firearm, whatever's in the vehicle, and pull over at a rest stop or wherever's safe, and simply either walk around to the trunk and put it in the trunk, and that satisfied the next state's, definitions, or stick it through and into the trunk, and it's now outside of the passenger compartment, and so you're safe to travel throughout that state. Then you may get to the next state, and there's a similar to Florida or reciprocates, and so you can pull it out of the trunk and put it back where it is. And that is an issue that I would say surprisingly few people, even people with a great deal of experience in carrying concealed weapons, and military personnel, police officers even,
Sure.
who don't realize, oh, that rule changed, and now, I can't have it in the passenger compartment. And then some have it in the passenger compartment that it's fine, but it has to be in certain specific places in the passenger
How many
compartment.
people have you heard stories about going to get on an airplane and having like a knife in their purse or on their person,
Oh.
a briefcase, or
Yeah.
just completely forgetting that that they had it.
Exactly. I mean, in some situations, it's glaring, and so you hear people saying, well, what the hell was he thinking or not thinking?
Yeah,
because who the hell would put
Yeah,
that?
but I think if you carry it with you everywhere, you don't think that you're carrying it.
Right, and when you visit any concealed carry, either website or even through law enforcement, it's something that they point out and they focus on because of that fact. Like the United States Concealed Carry Association, a great organization, and they're obviously a Second Amendment organization, but most people who are involved in or proponents of either carrying or even gun ownership, because obviously there's a sector of society that don't believe anybody but the police or the military should have firearms, first responders, what have you. There's a lot of debate over it.
Sure.
And what
one of the most highly inflammatory topics is gun laws, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and of course, unfortunately, at least over the past recent years, you've had the school shootings, you've had all of these crazy situations where people are abusing gun rights. Some of them don't even have legal guns or guns legally. They shouldn't have them, and so that adds fuel to the fire in the debate.
You and I have talked extensively about how if you play by the rules to buy a gun, right, you go to these gun shows, right? If you're a dealer, like the difference of being a dealer, right, or or having. Well, to explain a little bit about that, because this is crazy to me. How you could sell and not be a. What's the what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, FFL license is a federal firearms license, and basically to get an FFL license,
Which means you're like a dealer, right?
Right.
Essentially.
Right. Traditionally, you have to be a dealer or be in the business of transferring or selling firearms. There are people out there who are not. There are also people who do in the age of technology and the internet. They have online, gun sale businesses. And so they get their FFL license. And if you have an FFL license, some of the benefits are you can buy firearms at wholesale. You can buy suppressors and things that traditionally fully automatic weapons that other people with a standard concealed weapon permit cannot access. And so what happens is, let's say a typical gun show, you can go into a gun show and you'll see tables set up with various dealers from around the area or even out of state or what have you, and they come down, they bring their products, and they lay them out on a table. And when you go to purchase a firearm, you've got to go through,
what is it, 72 hours or whatever?
Yes. In many situations, if you have a concealed carry permit, again, I'm going to take Florida, and I have one. So let's say I went up to a table and say, oh, hey, I'd like to purchase this firearm. The fact that you have that carry license or permit presumes that you've had gun safety courses, that you've proven on written tests and at the range to be proficient with the firearm. You know how to break it down, field strip it, clean it, keep it, all the safety rules, and you get your permit. So it's easier to buy a gun there. People who don't have a permit go through, anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours of paperwork and federal background checks and things like that. All of which, and there's another debate there, where people say, why do I have to go through all that stuff just to purchase a firearm? And I don't want anybody to know that this serial number is registered to me. And I'll follow up with a little issue that happened with me on a gun that I owned. And so they have protocols that have to be filed. The part that becomes
sticky,
if you will, debatable, is that you can have a dealer at one table and then 10 feet to the side is the the open sale table where you can literally go up. There's no background checks. You give them the money, you take the pistol or rifle or whatever it is you're buying,
How are they allowed to do that?
and you walk out. Because open sale don't have the same restrictions as
So,
a dealer.
so if
or
I'm
an
if you're an
FFL.
open seller, right?
Right.
But do you have to do anything to qualify? Is there any qualification to be an open seller?
They should be doing at a minimum background checks, but many of them don't. In other words, it would be almost identical to walking out on the street and either a friend, a relative, or someone you don't even know who's a friend of a friend saying, "Hey, I'm trying to sell this."
So I can legally
45
purchase
that I
a
have.
gun from you.
Yes.
You can, and as long like
And there's no bill of sale required. There's no documentation.
Nothing required.
You give me the cash. I give you the gun. It's now your gun.
and you having a concealed permit, right? Is there anything that you are required to do if you sell a gun?
No,
No.
the concealed permit protects me or permits me to carry concealed. And,
Right,
And again,
right.
it could be.
It's just bizarre to me that you have these shows like it just makes sense to have to go through those things, but I don't understand why they allow, or what seems frustrating to me, because I'm not like a gun guy, you know. Obviously, I've seen, in the city we call it things that have fallen off a truck,
Right.
and they don't have serial numbers, right? There's, it exists. There's a black market. We know this, right? It's just amazing to me that at these gun shows, you actually have people that go, right, and get around the system, and it's
Yeah.
allowed. And I to me, it just seems it doesn't
Well, and
just doesn't add up.
that's why a lot of people who have issues with that particular method of selling firearms have issues with
Sure.
it, because they're saying, well, how do we track these? The Second Amendment proponents will say, well, the government, it's a constitutional right. The government has no business being involved in what I purchase and what I sell with regard to firearms. I have a right to do that, a constitutional right. And therein lies the issue.
Sure, but like you
and-
said, law is all interpretation, right?
Right, and we're not here on this show to debate which way is correct, or what side is correct in their interpretation
Sure.
of the laws, or their opinions about how it's
Yeah,
done.
we're just citizens.
We're just pointing out that these issues do exist.
Sure.
So depending on your perspective, they can make total sense or they can make no sense.
I find it interesting that you have to have a driver's license to drive a car,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But you don't to have a gun.
Right. You just
it
need
just
some
seems
form of state ID or valid ID.
Yeah.
It could be, usually it's like a social security number, either a driver's license or state issued
Yeah.
identification card. Sometimes, other forms of identification may be sufficient. But at a private sale table, like I said, it's like walking outside here and you meet your buddy and he pulls up in the parking lot. He says, "Hey, here's that .38 revolver that you were interested in." It's like, okay, here's the $100. You get the gun. Sale's done.
Let me ask you this: what doesn't protect you as a buyer is if that gun has been proven to have been involved in a shady scenario, right?
Correct.
Then the onus is really on you. Then, correct? If
Well,
you don't have a bill of sale,
yeah.
then it does kind of, if you want to get around the system, you could get stung by going around the system by not going through a legitimate source to obtain that.
Well, what
firearm.
it does is it brings you to the forefront because, first of all, if a gun does or a part of a firearm does not have a serial number, it raises a flag to law enforcement. And so what law enforcement does by necessity is, let's say the firearm has a serial number etched into whatever part they find. and this is a real life situation that we've discussed, and I'll discuss it now because I think it directly illustrates this particular
importance.
issue. Yeah. I had just a little, I think it was a Ruger 1022, which is one of the most popular firearms in the country, if not the world. It's got thousands of aftermarket parts. You can do all kinds of things with it. It's a for those who like guns, it's a 22 caliber long rifle. It's a small, small caliber in the way of calibers. You go up from there. But here's the point. I purchased the gun at a sporting goods store and went through all the paperwork. I did have a concealed permit, so it was no problem. And basically what the concealed permit does in Florida for purchasing a gun, the benefit of that is that I've already gone through the government process in getting the permit. So when I purchase a gun, I could literally buy a box of ammunition for it, and when I'm out of the store and in my car, load it up, and I've got it as soon as the sale goes through, and for me or any permit holder, you can use it immediately. If you don't have a permit, then there's the delay, and you can purchase it and come back in 3 to 4 days to actually pick it up because they can't release it to you until that time period has lapsed. Now, in this particular situation, I had bought the rifle, and it came in a standard wood stock, but there's what they call a takedown screw, where you unscrew it and the entire barrel and action comes out of the stock, and I put it into an aftermarket stock to make it kind of look cool. I can't remember what it looked like. It almost looked like a sniper rifle, if you will.
But just aesthetics. You just wanted to change the aesthetic.
Yeah. It was kind of cool looking, and
sure.
So the aftermarket stock, I think I ordered it online or something. It's not a firearm, so it's not serialized. So they just, you pay it and you wait for it. They deliver it, and then you pop the rifle together and put the wood stock back in the original box I bought it in, and then I used it as is. So after a period of time, I decided I wanted to get a different gun, and I sold the gun to, I want to say it was a pawn shop. It may have been a gun store. I can't remember specifically because it was 9 to 10 years prior to the incident, and I'm going to describe the incident now. I'm at work one day. I'm an attorney. I practice in criminal defense, and I get a call from a detective back in the county where I sold it 10 years prior, and they asked if they could come in and speak with me. I said, of course. So they come into the office, and I'm talking to them. I said, did you ever own a, Ruger 1022? I said, I did. Well, can you tell us what happened? I said, I can't remember specifically where I sold it, but I sold, the firearm with the aftermarket stock. They were still together, and in addition to that, I sold the original wood stock because it was in mint condition, because in 2 days I took it off, put it back in a box with its padding, whatever, and that was the last I saw of it. Well, apparently it was involved in a shooting and a homicide, and someone was killed with it, and they were trying to track down the chain of ownership, and the last person that it was registered to me, the serial number, was mine through my registration through the store. And what they did was, whomever it was that the sale was through, was they only logged in for ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, that they received
a
wooden stock for a 1022 rifle, but they didn't record the serial number, which was a matching serial number, but they didn't record the actual barrel and what they call trigger group or action in the sale. So they said, well, when we talked to them, they told us you only sold them a stock. And I'm like,
Untrue.
why would I do that?
Yeah,
I
right.
sold them the rifle. I just kind of threw the stock in with it because I had no use for it. And, they were, needless to say, quite upset about that.
Sure.
Because, like I said, who knows whose hands it traveled through, but it wound up in the hands of somebody who was involved in a homicide, and now they can't trace where it goes or where it went when it left my hands into the place that I sold it. So in that regard, you can kind of relate to the anti-gun lobby who says, hey, the laws are too loose on these things. And so, you once again, you run into this debate between how much access or knowledge should the government have under your Second Amendment rights with,
Well, look at drugs, right? We have prescription
Yes.
drugs, and we have a rampant problem in this country with drugs, right? And they're monitored. If you're caught with a narcotic and you don't have a prescription and it's not in the bottle, you're catching a felony.
correct?
And I'm a firm believer that if people want guns, they're going to get guns. There's too much money to be made.
Well, that's another huge problem because there are many perfectly legitimate reasons for people to own guns.
Sure,
It's
but
one,
just for the fact that if you want to collect them,
sure,
right?
there are collectors.
Doesn't mean I'm sure that people buy guns and never shoot them,
right.
right? But that there's an element out there that if they want a gun, they're either gonna beg, borrow, or steal to get it, right? And they'll do whatever they have to. Why? Because they don't care.
Exactly.
So I don't care how strict the laws are, right? It's not gonna prevent somebody from getting a gun.
Right. And short of going through the entire nation and literally seizing every person's firearm collection to either catalog it or destroy it or confiscate it or whatever, it's a virtually impossible task. So that's where the registration requirements become a heated battleground when it comes to ownership and possession of firearms. And like you said, there are people who collect it. You have the anti-gun people who are saying, who the hell needs to collect guns? It's like, well, that's really not your business. Who are you to collect, I don't know, Waterford Crystal?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I don't see any
Kokeshi
purpose.
dolls.
I don't see any purpose in that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Should you have to have that serialized?
And look, with this pandemic, how many people? There's an ammunition shortage right now.
Oh my Lord!
You know?
Did you see the gun sales? The increase in gun sales. You can go on to any because of course they now have firearms. Gun stores, online gun stores.
Sure.
Some of them don't even have a storefront. Most of
Right.
them do, where you can go to one of either their primary location or their sole location or one of their locations, and some guns will list it as pickup only, where you got to go into the store and get it. But the vast majority are mail order. Now you have to send it to an FFL dealer or licensed dealer locally to pick it up and then go through the paperwork there for the transfer. But for the most part, there are guns going everywhere. And like you said, the counter argument to that is, well, wait a second. I have 4 kids. I live on a piece of property, whether it's rural or urban, and I want to protect my family. There's a lot of lunatics out there.
Sure.
I don't need someone breaking into my house and,
Right.
whether it be a
There's
rape
also
or
snakes.
a robbery. Or
Could be snakes.
snakes. Because a lot of people use them because they live in, like you said, a more rural area. They may
Right.
have a lake or a river near their
Yeah.
house or something, and they've got moccasins or rattlesnakes or
Gators.
gators wherever you are. And you what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to let it roam around. You could call animal control, and it usually takes them 3 or 4 hours to come out to the house. And so there are valid arguments on both sides depending on what side of the issue you want to argue.
Well, and then mental health issues, they're huge
That's
right
a-
now,
yeah.
right? It's
Yes.
if anybody's on Facebook these days, people are getting a little out of sorts with this pandemic, and you can, certainly a lot of mental health issues in this country.
Right, and if you go and you research the statistics for the sale of firearms, it has literally skyrocketed since, I would say, probably the second month in of COVID, because people are watching the news.
Oh yeah.
They're seeing people who are hurting. They're starting to steal for whatever reason. They're destroying property or breaking into
riots.
property. Riots.
Looters.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
we talked about a case the other night, right?
yes, with the attorneys and coming
Jersey,
out
yeah.
with their guns, and
What was it, the Castle Doctrine we were discussing?
yes, where you have a constitutional right to protect your property, and those become very complicated situations, and they're all, as we said, fact specific. You may have 6 people saying, "Oh yeah, they were waving their guns, and the guy pointed in my face and started screaming at me, and I was scared to death." And then you get 6 other people in the crowd are saying, "He never did that. He had it at his side on his porch, and he never came out to the."
Oh, you'll get.
driveway."
I'm a firm believer that in those scenarios where things are amplified, you really don't know what you see.
Right, because people are spinning it
Yeah.
to their, what their position is.
Right.
So it's complicated. It's not a cut and dry issue, because in our country, just like quote free speech, some people may not think it should be so free. Other people think, hey, I can say whatever the hell I
you
want.
can say whatever you want, but there are consequences, right? And that's
Right.
one of the things I think would be great for another show. Something else we wanted to talk about today, too, is with getting your medical marijuana license in the state of Florida, is it or is it not true that you lose your concealed carry or you can't carry a firearm? There's some ambiguity there?
I'm not positive on the interaction between, like, if you qualify for a medical marijuana card, does that adversely affect your right to retain or obtain a concealed weapons permit? Because some of the questions on the forms for applying for the concealed weapons permits have to do with whether or not you've been adjudicated incompetent, whether you suffer from any mental health issues, whether you suffer from health issues that might, jeopardize your ability to safely possess and use a firearm. And there's different things that are debated. I have a friend of mine in Southwest Florida, and we used to talk about it. We'd be doing a deposition. He was a prosecutor. I was a defense attorney, but we were pretty much on the same page with regard to gun ownership. And, we were just doing one of those kind of esoteric, deliberations between the two of us of like, how can you address the problem? And, one of my suggestions was, well, if you're going to possess a firearm, you should be able to show that you're competent with it. You should be able to show that you understand the laws pertaining to firearms. And his position was, and when to shoot. Okay, there's the big question. A firearm is a paperweight unless you pick it up and pull the trigger. Now it's a deadly weapon. And let's face it, when firearms were developed, they are specifically intended to kill. That's why they were invented. Now, throughout the years, there are various applications for it. You have hunters, right? And then you get into a debate about hunters. Is it with animal rights groups, and should you be out shooting at deer so that you can mount the head and put it on the wall in your den because it's an ego thing, or there are people who go out and they hunt, and just like throughout his history, they use every part of the deer. They butcher the meat, they
Sure.
eat it, and that
And it's free range.
Sure, and they do. Like free range chickens when you
Yeah.
buy eggs in the store.
Sure.
And so, once again, you have legitimate and illegitimate arguments on both sides.
Right.
And when you're a
And
legislator,
it's a hot topic, man. You know that.
sure, oh, absolutely, because nobody wants to see anybody either, mistakenly shot or killed with a firearm, and that comes into, I'll give an example from a case I had. Young guy, college graduate, I think he was an accountant, lived with his wife. They had a little girl, I think she was 2 or 3, and the police had come to their house, so they answered the door and they said, listen, we've got 2 or 3 guys running around, they got firearms, and they've been randomly shooting at houses and trying to break into houses. So he had a firearm. He took it out of his gun safe, which is safe and secure, as it should be. And he, his wife couldn't sleep. They brought the kids into the bedroom. And he said, you guys just stay here. I'm just going to kind of hang outside and make sure nothing happens. He brings his firearm with him, which he's entitled to do. It's his property. He wasn't displaying it or waving it around or shooting warning shots in the air or any of that ridiculous, stupid stuff. By the way, warning shots are not legal. Okay, so anybody out there who thinks they can fire a shot into the air, just remember what goes up comes down, and you don't want to hit somebody 1.5 miles away who's riding their bicycle because you fired a warning shot into the air, and a lot of people, surprisingly, many people will say, I just fired a warning shot. It's like, you can't do that.
That's an attention getter.
Right. It gets the attention, but the projectile's still hovering in the air waiting to hit something. And it has no brain and it has no discretion on what it hits. So you cannot go around.
That's just physics at work.
Yeah, you cannot fire you cannot fire
no
weapons
warning
into
shots.
the air. So he was outside, and hours went by. It was like 4:30. So he came back into the bedroom, and with the newer semi-automatic pistols, Glock was probably the first one to develop what they call the safe action pistol, where there's no external safety on it, but there's an extended trigger pull, so that you don't accidentally discharge a weapon. But people who've never used the firearms may not know that. And so what ended up happening was he had put his firearm, and I won't tell you the brand or name or anything like that because I don't want to point fingers, but he put it on his nightstand. He laid down with his daughter and his wife, and of course it was late in the night. It was kind of a stressful night because they didn't want to be broken into, and he fell asleep. Well, the little girl woke up early, went to the bathroom, came back into the bedroom, and saw what, kids are kids. It's like, oh, what's that? And curiosity, she picked it up, pulled the trigger, and shot herself in the abdomen and almost died. And what do you do in that situation? He wound up getting, I think, 8 years in prison because he, didn't, by leaving it unattended on the nightstand and loaded and cocked, it takes like 2.5 pounds of pressure, I think, on that particular weapon to pull the trigger and discharge it, and it shot his daughter in the chest. Now, I almost wanted to say this poor guy because it was obviously.
Well, it's one of those scenarios where there's no winner. There's no.
I mean, this is his daughter who he worships, and this is his little girl,
right?
And the guilt.
Yeah.
And the
guilt would I mean, the time is like standing on your head compared to the guilt, because after the time he's still going to have that guilt, right?
Right. Right. And
thank God she didn't die.
Exactly.
But I mean, talk about a family being torn apart, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when emotions take over, everything else goes out the window.
Sure. I mean, how many stories, do we hear, of children, and sometimes you have them secure and they get in and they still unlock them and they still get to them, right? So and
then you see these situations like the school shootings where a number of teachers. They have a SRO, as we call
Yeah,
them,
yep,
at least
school
in
resource
Florida,
officer,
school
yeah.
resource officer, and they're armed, but they perhaps can't get to the area where the shooting's going on. But a teacher has a permit to carry a firearm, but one of the sterile areas you can't carry the firearm is school property or school events.
Yeah.
So he leaves it out in his car, as he does properly. But if he had the gun on him,
Yeah.
he could have prevented 26 other people from
Sure.
getting killed.
Sure.
So therein again lies one of these incredibly complex issues as to should he have been permitted to have it in a safe place, maybe a locked drawer
Yeah.
in his desk where students can't access it.
Let me ask you a question in regards to the gentleman that his daughter shot herself. Are there mandatory minimums in that scenario?
In that scenario, there wasn't. In Florida, we have the 1020 life law, which means there are a list of enumerated felonies, and the rule basically was that there's no mandatory minimum if the use of a firearm is one of the necessary elements of the offense, because it would be considered double jeopardy as far as the sentencing goes. And so in that case, there was no mandatory minimum, or the state did not seek it.
Okay.
And so you go by the regular score sheet. And one thing, and I'll give a hats off to the state attorney's office, because they took into consideration the mental distress, et cetera,
Yeah.
on him, because this was his little girl. And so they agreed to a reduced sentence, but a pretty hefty sentence in the general public's eyes. But he probably could have gotten, 15 years on it. So they
Does he have? Did he have to
accord
do like
that.
80% of the time?
Yeah, he'll have to save 85%.
85%.
Yeah, that's standard with every prison sentence in Florida. So 8 years and 85% of that. So it's it was a rough situation, man. And of course, then you get input from both sides of the family. The marriage split up. It was just
yeah.
an absolute nightmare. I mean, it was just a nightmare.
Nobody wins.
No, it was just bad all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it was something that it could have easily been prevented
Sure.
by him simply putting his gun back in the safe. But at the time that he did it, he was still paranoid that someone was going to break into his house. What
Right.
if the police were a mile away checking around for whomever was doing the shooting, and then they wind up in your living room? And now what do you do if you run to a gun safe? How quick does it take to get into the bedroom?
Yeah.
And so he left it out, and it's kind of like carrying a concealed firearm protection, but not having a loaded magazine in it.
Yeah.
It's like, what good is it?
Right.
What, are you going to throw it at them like in the
Right.
movies?
Right.
I mean, so again, it's just an incredibly complicated area. And I think when people debate it publicly on television or debate it in these political forums, especially during an election year when it is highly politicized, I don't think they really go through all of these different permutations in these situations as to the practicality of what they're saying.
Well, I look at it this way. I'm a firm believer that if you want to have a handgun and you want to own a gun, and you can pass the background check and you do your due diligence and you learn how to use it properly, go right ahead. And I have the choice not to have one,
Right.
and I don't, because they scare me,
Right.
and I don't have one for that reason, right? Not that I'm a hothead or, I've seen couples where both the female and the male have handguns. They both are permitted, but they are hotheads,
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so, I have my beliefs. I know that I'm also not naive to think that you can't get one on the black market, right? Because you can get whatever you want on the black market.
Yes.
You know, it's
If
naive
you
to
look
think
hard
that
enough, you'll
if
find
you
one.
could change all the laws you want, you're still going to be able to get guns.
Yep.
You can take drugs away, you'll still be able to get drugs. I mean, look at prisons, right? You can get drugs in prison, right? There's weapons in prison, and that's a guarded area, right? That's
Right.
supposed to be a secure guarded area.
Exactly.
Guess what? Everything's in there. So, whatever. So, I'm not naive to think that because you change rules that people, if they want something, they're going to get it.
Right. And then there's that lobby that says we need harsher gun laws. It's like, how many gun laws can you have in a book? I
the
mean,
thing
they've
of it
pretty
is
much
the
got
people that
everything covered.
are following the law are typically law-abiding. You know, if a guy shoots a woman or a woman shoots a man, you know, I'm sure the numbers are extremely low statistically that they were a concealed carry. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yes.
you know, typically those types of crimes are made by people who don't follow the rules, not by the ones who do follow the rules.
Yes. I mean, to an extreme standard. I mean, the people who are, quote,
The old adage, right? A couple of bad apples
Right.
spoils the whole barrel, right?
sure. I mean, because traditionally the people who do follow the rules and, you know, safety rules, permitting rules,
All
you know,
that.
et cetera, they're not the ones that are using them for malicious purposes.
Right.
You know, and the ones who are usually get them from God knows where.
Sure. They're going to
Like
get them
I
no
said,
matter what.
They're going to find them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
they're going to have them. You know, and you can't go around and collect every gun everywhere.
It's not going to happen.
No, it can't happen. I don't see anywhere where it practically can happen.
Well, now we got 3D printers now, right?
Oh yeah, another.
So guess
issue.
what?
You,
You
just,
can make whatever you want.
exactly.
So you can take all of them away. Guess what? You can still
Pop it in the printer and
still make it.
create a 45 and off you run it.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of something that you can't detect.
That's incredible to me. I
Yeah.
mean, those 3D printers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get out of here.
Okay.
Good conversation. We'll get a little bit more into some of these other topics, some more law topics down the line. Like I want to, look up that, discuss the medical marijuana, and how the law in Florida in regards to that. We'll talk about some other things. We'll talk some more about the Consult app next time. But yeah, good conversation today, Chris, with all this gun stuff. It's fascinating to me and highly, highly controversial stuff.
It is.
So that's what really matters today with Attorney Chris Fry. We will see you next Monday. And we'll be back here Wednesday for our Consults lighter side of legal. So everybody have a great day.
Consult podcast.
And
yes.
we'll see you next time.